Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay, I think we can start the session. My name is Stein Sandven. I am going to chair this session, and I hope we can make the system work. We have a list of, I think, 11 speakers this morning, and I'm just wondering if we have the first speaker here, Ivan Agarkin. He is going to speak about geotechnical monitoring near the Hanover test site. So I wonder if Ivan is available now. Okay, if he is not there yet, maybe we can go to the second on the list. Tatiana Matveya, are you here? I think I can see you. Okay, let me see now.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, very good. So would you like to present your poster yourself, or how is that?
Yeah, it's me.
Very
And
good.
yeah, if I understand correctly, I have 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah, maybe we have more, you know, that's not so critical.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I can start. Yeah.
Yeah, can you maybe I need to we need to share the screen with you then.
Yeah, sure. Just wait for a second. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, let me see now.
It's not so easy, this one. And now?
Yeah, there we are. That's right.
Nice.
Very good. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, dear colleagues. My name is Tatiana Matveyeva. I'm from Institute of Geography of Russian Academy of Science, Laboratory of Climatology. And my study here is devoted to Arctic sea ice in Arctic seas and Arctic Ocean. And I analyzed seasonal cycle, trends and variability and autocorrelation and so on. And in my poster, I just present some trends of Arctic sea ice, area, and just examples of trends. And if you can see here in the red columns and histograms, the speed, or not a speed, a trend of decrease of Arctic sea ice is the most higher in the Barents Sea in winter. Winter for Arctic, it's a March also. It's not spring in Arctic. And the high speed of decrease of Arctic sea ice in September, it's Central Arctic, it's called also Arctic Ocean. This is the part of my study. It's also I analyzed the trends of increment. Increment, difference between of sea Arctic ice between neighboring months, and maybe the high speed of melting. It's in the Russian part of Arctic seas. It's the Kara Sea, Laptev Sea, and East Siberian Sea. I think is the most important part of this part of my study. And the second part of my study includes correlation and the relationship, spatial and temporal, between Arctic sea ice in different seas and surface temperature in North Hemisphere. I'd like to draw your attention on the orange box, September correlation, and some interesting remote feature in Laptev Sea. You can see the a negative, strong negative correlation in the European parties. Yeah, to conclude this part of my studies, I want to present you some short results, we revealed some significant negative correlation with surface temperature and the land, and some remote connections. It's very interesting for me personally, because it may be it may be correlated with some circulation mechanism. I mean, North Atlantic oscillation or something like that. Also we described some interesting changes in Arctic seas and trends of Arctic seas. Yeah, I think that's all what I wanted to say. If you want to learn more, please contact me and see my poster, explore my poster. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments from the participants? Maybe you can you say a little more? Yes, is there a question?
Oh, sorry, I can see the full screen, please. Wait for a second.
That's okay.
Okay, but why can't I do it? Okay. Yeah. I'm ready. I'm ready to. Yeah.
No, it's just if some of the listener have questions, we can do that now. Maybe I can ask you a little. Is there a question from somebody? Maybe I can ask you a little bit more about this, because this is the atmospheric signal and the sea ice signal, and of course there must be some coupling and connections here. Do you have any more? Can you say more about how you think this coupling is working? Because it is the air masses, and maybe also the stratosphere has something to say. Have you looked at the possible coupling mechanisms for this for these correlations between ice and air temperature?
Yeah, sure. Because I'm atmospheric scientist, and yeah, I can say a little bit more about a link between North Atlantic oscillation and the changes of Arctic sea ice, we studied some correlation between these mechanisms. When the phase of North Atlantic oscillation is positive, it means that it's a strong westerlies and more warm air mass from Atlantic to Arctic seas. I mean warm, air masses, and this signal, we can see this signal in the Arctic sea ice. Then it affects to decrease of ice formation, because we have more warm in the ocean, and it not stops, but it disturbs some freezing mechanisms, and so we can see a decrease of Arctic ice in Barents Sea, in the Kara Sea also, because this is strong signal from Atlantic. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a lot of things you can say about this, but I think it is always interesting to know what the mechanism that are working, and of course now we see that, and of course we know that there can be large interannual variability in these processes. And for example, this winter has been rather cold in Svalbard and Barents Sea, and we have had more sea ice around Svalbard this winter than previous winter. So it's interesting to see what will happen even this summer and next winter. So yes. Any other questions or comments to your poster? Okay, maybe not then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the next speaker, that is myself. I have the next presentation about a project which I'm running. So let me see how I can do that. Yeah, share. Let me see here. Just trying to see how I can bring up my own poster here.
It's fine.
Yes.
And what about Ekaterina Chernявskaya? I guess I should be next in the list. No?
Yes, that's fine. I mean, yeah, that's fine. Just because there is some change. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. You are the next one. So please, Ekaterina, you are going to talk about the long-term changes of Arctic Ocean surface layer.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, please go ahead. I'm sorry for this confusion.
Okay, so I don't. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so my name is Ekaterina Chernявskaya, and I'm from Arctic and Antarctic Research Institute. And yes, my poster is about long-term changes of the Arctic Ocean surface layer. So while we may consider variations of the surface layer state as an indicator of the climate change. First of all, because surface layer is the link between the atmosphere, sea ice, and the underlying waters. And also it's known that stability and development of the ice cover are closely associated with the thermohaline properties of the upper ocean, such as depth of the mixed layer and depth of halocline. We used historic oceanographic data since 1950s to calculate salinity and thickness of the mixed layer and halocline layer. And here I perform results, average for the 3 periods. And I guess you can see the differences between these periods in the configuration of the fields of these characteristics. Especially these differences are noticeable in the surface layer salinity anomalies. And for the halocline layer, they are prominent not only in the salinity anomalies, but also in the thickness anomalies. So we raised questions why these differences may occur, and decided to look for the reason from the outside. Here you see the some atmospheric indexes, also averaged by the same 3 periods, and some hydrological factors that we assume to be the main affecting factors on the surface layer state. And they also have some differences between these 3 periods. Also, we calculated salinity gradients in the halocline layer that may serve as indirect mark of the stratification in the layer. And we see that according to our data, stratification in the halocline layer is quite strong in the last period, even though it became shallower by at least 10 meters. Such conditions are supportive for the interpycnoclinic ADIS formation, and I saw publications where the higher frequencies of this ADIS formation was emphasized, especially in the Canada basin. So we also think that is important result. Then returning to the question about differences in the surface layer and halocline layer parameters, we used atmospheric indexes, data on water exchange between Arctic Ocean and the neighboring oceans, data on ice extent and river runoff to build statistical models for the salinity and thickness of the mixed layer. These statistical models are, in fact, linear regression equations that connect all the listed external factors to reconstruct time series of the mixed layer salinity and thickness, and to give an idea of the processes that could cause this internal variability. And on the graphic, you can see that black line is the actual time series and red line is the reconstructed time series that was obtained with these models. So that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments from anybody?
Oops.
I think this is very interesting to look at what happens to the Arctic Ocean under the sea ice, and we see these interesting interannual variabilities in the mixed layer thickness, and yeah, it's going down quite a bit in the recent. If you go back, just go back to your slide a little bit.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Where?
If you go, just keep it at the bottom.
Okay.
The lowest, the time series of mixed layer thickness in these different. It's quite strong variability. Maybe you want to say a little bit of comment on these variabilities you have. For example, in the Amerasian basin, you have had a downward trend for several decades, and if you go to the Eurasian basin, it's going much more up and down in the recent decades.
Yeah, I think it's we see that Amerasian basin there is a strong freshening occurred now, and that's why the salinity goes down, of course, and also it affects somehow on the mixed layer thickness. But in the Eurasian basin, well, all this basin is affected by Atlantic waters, and probably the variations of how to say, the exchange between the oceans somehow affected this variations of salinity, and mixed layer thickness also.
Yeah. No, again, it's quite a strong signal, and it's going to be interesting to see in the next decade what will happen then to this
but also I wanted to say that also atmospheric circulations play a big role in these variations.
Yes.
Because as you can see in the equations, that there are an Arctic dipole and AMO oscillations and Arctic oscillations, they are all presented.
Yes, yes.
So,
okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome.
I think then I'll go on. This is then I am the next. I can see now I should be the next presenter. Let me see how I can do this. Oh, yeah. Okay. Let me see how I can do this. Okay. Cancel. Okay. Let's see here. Let me see. No, I can't find my my poster. So, no. Let me see. Okay. Maybe I would just, I don't understand why I don't find it. Maybe we just go on next speaker.
Hi Stein. I just sent you a link like from the Google Doc. They sent links.
Okay, there is a link.
So you can check. I put the link so in the chat. So maybe you can click on that and access your poster.
Let me see. Okay. Good. Okay, I found it there, and then I just, let me see, how do I share screen then?
Yeah, on the bottom of your screen, there's middle, there's a share screen button.
Yeah, I thought it was. Okay, top board. Finder. I don't see how I can get it up. That's the question now.
Staying on your Zoom window.
Yes.
On the if you go on the bottom of your screen, there is 6 buttons, and you can click on the middle one that says share screen.
Yeah, I see the share screen, and I'm doing that.
And it's not coming up?
Not coming up. I think, you know, while I'm fiddling with us, we just go on with the next speaker, so you don't need to sit and wait for that. The next speaker is, let me see now the schedule here.
That must be me.
Is that you? It's Melina Kudryatyanova. Is that you?
Yeah, that's me. We skipped poster number 3, Ekaterina.
Yes.
I can go ahead if.
Yeah, please do so, because we don't need to delay this session also. Just go on.
Right. Can people see my screen? Can everyone see my screen? Okay.
Yes, we see your screen.
Good. Yeah, so this is a little different than the rest of the papers in this session. It draws from a white paper listed on the Arctic Observing Summit website that has to do with monitoring food security. So marine resources are, as you all know, critical to nutrition and food security, and an important part of the wage and subsistence economy among Inuit. But their management has not received much attention by policymakers and economists. Additionally, a lot of the food security policies in place either focus on treating the symptom but not the cause, such as, for example, the community freezers, or they fail to treat the symptom altogether, such as, for example, food subsidy programs like the Nutrition North. So in this paper, we focus on Northern Labrador, as you can see on the map on the right. And we describe marine resource governance dimensions important to safeguard food security in those communities. And we propose the use of indicators as a monitoring tool that can help diversify risks and contribute to sustainability of fish stocks and marine mammals. Essentially, we argue that by ignoring issues related to the lack of capacity to access the marine resources, food security is inadequately addressed. So in the fall and summer of 2019, we conducted 2 focus groups with coastal communities and a series of interviews with regional stakeholders involved in marine resource management to capture their priorities for the development of marine resource governance indicators. And we found, among other things, that community members feel less empowered today to access resources and less able to afford food after the Labrador Inuit Land Claims Agreement in 2005 that initiated the self-governance of the region and led to the creation of the Nunatsiavut government. And second, we found that marine resource governance and management is fragmented. Communication channels are largely missing between stakeholders involved in decision making, and that their priorities and socioeconomic objectives are different. And there's also evidence for strong interconnections between subsistence and commercial harvesting, as you can see here in this figure. Along with some quotes from the focus groups that indicate how people feel about the issue of food security and their connection to marine resources. And so we started examining the barriers identified to food security in subsistence and commercial fisheries in parts in columns in the second and the third column. I'm only going to speak about the identified barriers. And let me just say, start with the subsistence harvesting. First of all, the main barriers include failure to capture Inuit knowledge, high costs of monitoring, misguided research priorities that fail to reflect local concerns, understudied socio-ecological dynamics. So, for example, could the extinction of the caribou put pressure on stocks of the Arctic char? Then there's also limited access to harvesting grounds and resources due to capacity and financial limitations, such as, for example, lack of gear, boats, and skidoos. And then moving on to the barriers for the commercial fishery, and starting from the bottom, an important barrier is that access and allocation to commercial fisheries adjacent to Nunatsiut is very limited, with distributional equity very loosely defined by federal government authorities. Second, sovereignty over marine resources is very limited, as despite the existence of co-management structures, decision-making remains at the ministerial discretion. Then science is largely missing to support management. So just an example, quotas for the Arctic char, which is a very important fishery in the region, are being arbitrarily set since the 90s, basically, when the science was interrupted. And at the same time, science has not communicated timely to rights holders. So we've had a recent example of a spatial overlap of the snow crab fishery with seismic testing. And then with respect to access to markets, the absent infrastructure network increases costs and decreases quality of the delivered product. And last, the communal management through which fisheries are managed limits financial independence to fishers and is a disincentive for capacity development to compete with other fleets. And I'll stop here in the interest of time, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. That was the many interesting aspects of fisheries management in this region. So is there anybody who want to comment on this? I think maybe I could ask you for a couple of things. First of all, I see the regulation of fisheries seems to be complicated in this region, and you see you explain that there are some conflicting interests here. So how is this actually working? Is it so that the national authorities are overruling the local authorities, or how is that?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. It is indeed very complicated, and the idea is that these local communities, through the regional government and the co-management board, is supposed to be participating in the decision-making process and providing recommendations on a yearly basis to the federal fisheries management authorities. Which is happening, of course, but at the end of the day, decisions on allocations and fisheries management are at the discretion of the minister, the federal minister. So at the end of the day, they don't really have much of a say in decision making, despite the co-management structure in place. So although it is institutionalized, in reality, their participation in decision making is very limited.
Yeah, can you also then what I understand that there is both subsistence harvesting and commercial harvesting. Does it mean that it's commercial harvesting which is dominating, or is there other unbalanced situation here?
So there's both commercial and subsistence harvesting, as you said, for different species. The only species for which there is both commercial and subsistence harvesting is the Arctic char fishery. And it would be interesting to look at the trade-offs between subsistence and commercial harvesting for these species in particular. But other than that, there's no other overlap between commercial and subsistence fisheries. Of course, the fact that there's no stock assessments happening for the Arctic char fishery and long-term studies are missing might create a conflict between the two.
Yeah. And also, finally, how is the general trends in the resources? Is it, and how is climate change affected? Because we hear about the changing of the ocean temperature in different regions are changing the fishery resources. Some species are migrating to other places and so on. How is that situation in your study area?
Again, a very good point, and there's a lot of uncertainty regarding how stocks are going to evolve because of climate change. Some people expect that stocks may move further north, but that is not necessarily the case. I would say that throughout the past, we've seen a lot of spatial variation in stock, but it really is unclear and has not been studied yet how this may affect the value of the fisheries at a regional scale. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think there are many interesting things one could discuss here. So I think thank you very much. It was very interesting. So let's see who is now next.
Hi, Stan. I can actually share your screen from here. I can share your presentation from here if you want to go now.
Well, I can. Yeah, maybe that I can do it. That's fine. You know, because that would be good. That thanks for helping me with that.
All right. Okay. I'll share now, so you can go. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes. Yes. That's very good. I can see not all of it, but I can see
I'll get it done.
some of it.
Done. So let me just expand and I can share. Okay.
Yes, thank you. There we are. Okay, I'm going to talk about a little bit different type of project. This is not directly a research project. It is a project which is about training and education in Arctic subject, and we call the project Useful Arctic Knowledge, a partnership for research and education. This is a project which is a joint project between Norwegian, US, and Canadian partners. And we have focused on organizing workshop, research schools, and other training activities. And in the project, we have 4 different scientific topics where we have these education activities and research schools. The first topic is about natural and human-made hazards in the Arctic. And we know, for example, that earthquakes is one of the issues, maybe not so much in the Arctic as other places on the globe, but there is expectation that earthquakes can evolve more, especially as a result of the melting of the Greenland ice sheet that is changing the geophysics of the area. And for example, it's hypothesis that it can become more earthquakes due to the melting of land ice areas. And for example, in Svalbard area, there is Svalbard, which you see on one of the figures, is one of the areas where there is quite significant earthquake activities. And even if there hasn't been any big event, there is sufficient earthquakes that it has impact on, for example, on buildings and other constructions. And then topic number 2 is about ocean acoustic environment. And as you know, ocean acoustic is important for the marine mammals because they communicate with acoustics. And we know that, for example, there is a human-generated noise from ship traffic and from oil and gas exploration is another issue. So this is one of the more controversial, well, maybe not controversial, but it's a debated, how can human activity generating noise really disturb marine mammals? This is a big issue in many other parts of the world, maybe not in the Arctic yet, but this can become a bigger issue in the future if there is going to be more human activities there. Okay, so if we go down, there is further down on the poster, we have a topic 3. This is more about cross-disciplinary data management. We know that there is a lot of data being collected now in the Arctic, and we are using new instruments. We collect more and more data, and these data can be sometimes more complicated, but the thing here is that it's important that we manage the data properly so that the data can be used after the project is finished. And many scientists, they are of course mostly concerned with collecting data, analyzing the data, and publish the results. But now there is more requirements to storing the data in proper way so that it's possible for other people to use the data later on. And now with climate change and environmental change, it is more and more important to be able to access data which have been collected several decades ago. And when we collect new data now, we have to make sure that these data become available for scientists also in the coming years. So that's number 3. And then topic number 4 is called community-based monitoring. We see here that many places in the Arctic where we have local communities, they can collect important data which can be used by scientists for scientific research, but also for practical use by the local inhabitants. And the lower left figure is example from Alaska, where local people are collecting sea ice thickness data from the fast ice going out from land out to the drift ice area. And this is example of very practical data collection, which is very important for the local communities, because the fast ice is really a transport. It's a transport mechanism. It's really, they use it for transport in the winter time. Of course, it's also important for the general climate research. The sea ice is one of the most significant sea ice indicators of climate in climate change in the Arctic. Yeah, I think I will stop with that. And if there are questions, please, I'm happy to answer questions. Okay, if there is no question, then we go on with the next presentation. Now I think it's Justin Ramash, is that correct? Are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Very good.
I'm gonna share my screen. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Can you hear me well as well? Yeah. Okay. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Justina Ramage, and I'm a researcher at Nordregio. It's a research institute working on regional development, mainly in the Nordic countries, but also in the Arctic. And I will present you some results on our study looking at the population living on permafrost in the Arctic. It started by the study initiated because there is a large part of the Arctic that is underlaid by permafrost, and because of permafrost thaw, there is more and more consequences of it in different settlements in the Arctic, but there are no data on how many people live in the Arctic and how many settlements are built on this permafrost. So in order to understand what are the consequences of permafrost thaw on the populations living on this, we decided to conduct some demographic study on population living on permafrost. So we combined different data sets, mostly population data set and also permafrost extent data set based on models showing the permafrost extent for the year 2014 and also to show the future permafrost extent for the year 2060. What we find is that there is half of the settlements from the Arctic that are located on permafrost. And there is more than 2 million inhabitants living on permafrost. On the graph that you see on the right side of the screen, the first graph shows the number of settlements on permafrost for the year 2017 and the year 2016. And the same, you can see the same on the next graph for the population on permafrost. And what we calculated is that there is now approximately half or more than 1 million people that live in a settlement where there is permafrost today and that permafrost is going to thaw. So this will have large consequences on the livelihood of people. First, because it affects the environment around these settlements on which people are having their subsistence activities, but it also will impact the infrastructure in these settlements. So on this first map here, you see the localization of settlements in the Arctic. The blue dots represent settlements, the coastal settlements on permafrost. The red-orange dots represent inland permafrost settlements, and the green one represent inland settlements as well that will not be anymore on permafrost by 2060. And as I said, there is approximately half of these settlements that will not be on permafrost anymore. The regions that will be mostly affected are the eastern part of Russia and Alaska. And the settlements that are mainly affected are located in the southern fringe of the permafrost. That's where permafrost occurs usually as sporadic or isolated patches. And in the map that you see on the right, we looked at the impact of permafrost thaw on the infrastructure in the Arctic. So the colors, the background layers on the map in orange, yellow, and red shows areas with a potential risk for permafrost thaw. So red areas show high risk for infrastructure due to permafrost thaw. And based on this layer, we also looked at how many airports and how many roads or harbors are located in this zone of infrastructure hazard. And we calculated that approximately 22,000 kilometers of roads will be affected by permafrost thaw. So road infrastructure is quite sparse in the Arctic because it's very challenging to build a road on permafrost, which is a very unstable ground. But a large part of these roads will be affected by permafrost and requires quite a lot of maintaining or rebuilding. There is also a certain amount of airports that are and airstrips that are located on permafrost zone, and due to the thawing of the ground, these airports will have to also face damages. With this study, we want to draw attention to the potential consequences of permafrost thaw for people living in the Arctic and the need for infrastructure repair and the costs that are related to permafrost thaw in the Arctic are high, and some communities will have or might already have trouble answering these damages. Yeah, so that's a short presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me now.
Thank you, Justin. This was very interesting to look at these projections into the next decades. I have a question about this projection, because I understand you are using some climate models to estimate the future changes in permafrost area, but I guess you also use some demographic projections to estimate your in your upper right figures when you project this quite strong decline of populations living in these areas. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not the permafrost extent model is mainly based on ground temperatures and other parameters. So yes, and also yes, of course, climate model. But what we did is like we combined this demographic data for the year 2017. So we have data for how many people live in the settlements. And we use this permafrost extent. So for the year 2000, sorry for the noise, 2017, we have accurate data on how many people live on the permafrost extent. For the year 2060, we assume no change in population because we don't have data on population projection for 2060. So we are, this is one of the limitations of our studies, that we are considering that population will remain unchanged by that time, but actually there might be way more people. But I mean, according to few studies that show projection, population should increase in these in the permafrost region, especially in larger settlements, for example, in the Siberian Arctic, where actually most of the, if you have a look at this map, in this area, population is predicted to increase. So our model is kind of underestimating maybe the amount of people that will be impacted by permafrost. So in a few decades.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting question, this demographic.
Yes.
I saw there was an Arctic Council report a few years ago where we could see some projections of populations in different parts of the area. I think you, in your institute, you are, I guess you are working with these sort of demographic questions in the Arctic as well. Do you have, I think you said that you can expect quite some significant growth of population in some areas. Mm-hmm. and decline in other areas. Can you say a little about that?
Well, it's mostly related to migration of people. Like there are lots of very small settlements in the Arctic, and in many of these settlements, I mean, there have been already in the past a lot of settlements that have closed down, a lot in Greenland, but also in Russia. So demography is like in many places in the world, like people are going towards the large urban centers. So these urban centers tend to grow, and these little settlements tend to decrease in population. So that's what is observed in the Arctic for the past. And there are a few studies, yes, we have a colleague working with these issues in the Russian Arctic, especially looking at population projections, but they are very few. So for this study, we could not find any circum-Arctic study looking at population projection. That's why we used knowledge, or data, accurate data from 2017.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other questions on this topic? Okay, thank you very much. And then we continue with the next speaker. Vera Vinogradova is the next one. So are you, yes, you are there?
Yeah, I'm here.
So can you bring up your presentation?
Yes. Do you see my presentation?
Yeah, I don't. You see, I don't have. I can't upload it. Maybe you or maybe somebody else can help you to bring up your
I'll
poster.
bring up a presentation now.
Okay.
Do you see my presentation now?
Is this it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay.
Yes, you can just start because now we can see your poster.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Vera Vinogradova. I'm from Institute of Geography, Russian Academy of Science, Laboratory of Climatology. My poster name change in the natural and climatic living conditions of human life in Arctic zone. Northern and Arctic territory occupy 68% of Russian territory. For the Northern and Arctic territories, the main factors of their sustainable development is the nature and climatic discomfort of human life. In this regard, the agency of using regionalization of Russia by the natural conditions of human life for the modern and future climate is growing. The investigations of the natural and climate conditions of northern and Arctic areas of Russia was conducted using the method of regionalization of Russian territory by environment conditions of human life. The regionalization is made on the basis of influence degree of the main natural factors, cold, heat, moisture, altitude, catastrophic events. In Arctic, 4 zones with unfavorable influence of the health, living, and labor activity of population are determined. We have analyzed nature conditions of human life in the second part of the 20th century and the changes in the middle of the 21st century. Left side of the poster display the change of the boundary of zone of discomfort on the 20th, beginning of the 21st century. For the Arctic regions of significantly reducing the territories with absolutely unfavorable conditions, mainly due to the enlargement very unfavorable areas. The southern boundary of unfavorable areas shifted to the north at the beginning of 21st century. Right side of the poster displays the modifications of natural and climate conditions in Russian Arctic during the global warming in the middle of the 21st century. The calculation results of the 3 models have been used. The first model, the Institute of Numerical Mathematics. The second, the model of Meteorological Office of Hadley Center. And the third model of Max Planck's Meteorological Institute. RCP 8.5 scenario has been used for the period 2046-2055. The maps show shift of the south boundary of absolutely unfavorable and very unfavorable zone on the map, and regionalization of Russian territory by environmental conditions of human life. The result of the model warming, you can see a significant reductions on on the territory with absolutely unfavorable conditions in the western and eastern part of the Russian Arctic. The scale of the reduction was comparable to the changes of discomfort in the hard anthropogenic scenario for the period 2046-2055. The boundary of absolutely unfavorable zone has the maximum deviation. Area of discomfort zone in the Arctic in the current and model climate warming you can see in the table. During the climate warming, the territory with absolutely unfavorable conditions reduced by 24%. The square of the very unfavorable and unfavorable zone increased by 10% each. According to the SCP 8.5 scenario, the square of absolutely unfavorable zone can decrease by 35–60% compared to the period 1960–1990, and by 11–56% compared with period 2001–2010. The model of the Meteorological Office of the Hadley Center shows the maximum changes, especially in the western part of Arctic zone. In conclusion, we can say a significant decrease in climatic discomfort areas was observed during the warming period from 1991 to 2010. It was manifested the reductions of territories with absolutely unfavorable conditions to the vital activity of populations and in the formations of conditions with lower degree of discomfort on their place. Absolutely unfavorable conditions remained only in the less populated central and partly eastern part of the Arctic zone. Changes were conducted with the decrease of some of negative temperatures, the decrease in the number of days with very low temperatures, as well as increase the sum of active temperatures and the increase in the light of the period without frost. Maximum decrease in climatic discomfort was observed in the municipalities on the coast sea, on the west coast of the Kara Sea, and the municipality on the coast of Pacific Ocean, south part of the Chukotka regions. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. It's quite interesting of presenting, and it's quite a lot of this is a climate change. It's a warming issue that you will have more warmer areas in larger part of Russia. How does this impact on, I guess, not only living condition, but also, for example, agricultural production? Are you looking into agriculture production also as part of this study?
Culture production, no, we don't investigate the study. Living conditions, the natural and climatic conditions of these territories. After we compared with our investigations with the economical development of the regions, but it is not on this presentation.
Okay, anybody else who have questions? Okay, thank you then, Vera. Then we go to the next speaker.
Thank you.
Natalia Viasigina, are you there? Maybe not. I don't see you on the list. So then it means that we just continue with the next presenter after that. That's Anastasia Makinika. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Thank you. Can you show your poster?
Yes, sure. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So hello everyone, and today I'd like to present to you my research about the adaptation to the changes in limiting factors in the boreal forests. As you know, the boreal region, it's really sensitive regions to the different factors, which can be different origin, like anthropogenic origin, like nutrient supply, for example. And also some natural factors, water, temperature. And in our research, we concentrated on two of them, because water and nitrogen or nutrient supply, they're two main limiting factors for the boreal zone. So our objectives were calculate CO2 efflux from the soil during the growing season, to determine some limits or stable conditions for the CO2 emission in our region, and to compare actually these two factors and their influence to the soil CO2 emission. So our research area, it's marked with this yellow star. It's actually the southern border of Russian Arctic zone, Turkhansk district of Krasnoyarsk region. And what we made there, we did some experiments, manipulation experiments, these two schemes of the experiments. First, with the water addition. So after each rain event, we measured the amount of water, and then we added to our treatments 0, 25, 50, and 100% different amount of water. And also we added additional treatments that was 30% of soil water content, which was permanent water conditions during the season. And then we measured CO2 emission. For the nitrogen experiment, we used another scheme. We did it just once, nitrogen addition in the start of growing season with a different concentration. As you can see here, actually the idea was to look at the different range of the concentration, from the smallest amount of nitrogen to the biggest. That's why our range of treatments is very high, like 10 treatments. And also we add the nitrogen to the soil with water. It was a nitrogen solution with 10 liters of water. And after we measure soil emission during the season. So for the measurements, we used a gas analyzer LICOR, and also near each soil color, you can see it here, plastic color, we also measured soil temperature and soil moisture. So here I presented how it looks in reality. This is the water experiment. Looks like a greenhouses, and during the season it was closed, and after each rain event we opened these boxes and then we added some water. And what we found, these experiments hold three seasons, 2015, 16, and 18. And actually we found different results. Why we found in the first year the biggest emission and the treatment with zero amount of precipitation? Because the season was really over precipitated, and this amount of water, actually during the season the soil moisture in this site was around 20-25%, even without any water addition. That was interesting, but we didn't expect it. So during these two other seasons, we found really expected results, that the biggest emission was observed in the treatment with 30% of soil water content, because actually this is the threshold soil moisture, or kind of optimal moisture conditions. After this threshold, we don't have any more water limitation for our soil CO2 emission. And we have very good dependence between the soil temperature and the soil moisture, like really exponential dependence. If we look at differences between the months, we found that the biggest emissions was at the end of July, actually, in July and August, like the seasonal part, the biggest part of this seasonal CO2 emission in this month. Later, we calculated Q10 coefficient to look at the temperature sensitivity of soil CO2 fluxes. And we also found that the biggest sensitivity was in our site with 30% of soil CO2, soil water content. So the second experiment with nitrogen addition, the sample plots was in the same forest type. It was a lichen pine forest. And what we found after the season, so before the experiment, in all treatments or sites, the emission was actually almost the same. Later, after the addition, we can see a very big trend from the smallest concentration to the biggest concentration of nitrogen. But in the middle of the season, this graph here, we found that the soil CO2 emission, actually it grows up to the concentration 100 kilogram of nitrogen per hectare. And that was interesting, and from our point of view, it's related to some kind of limitation from the natural climatic conditions, like water, first of all. Because soil microorganisms, it needs some more water to catch the additional nitrogen, which we added. So, and in the end of the season, it was the same picture, like when we started the experiment, the biggest emission was observed in the site with the higher nitrogen concentration. So here I would like to stop. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anastasia. It is very interesting to see these experiments. And could I ask you, do you know about similar experiments done in other places of the boreal forest in Siberia? Because I understand that the humidity, precipitation is a very important factor. So do you know of other similar studies in other areas where you have another, let's say, another climate, another amount of precipitation?
Yes, sure. I know about the other experiments. In European part of Russia, maybe you heard this experiment. They made also water addition during the season. And they also found some optimal conditions, but they didn't determine it like a threshold. They just found some range from 20 to 30, as I remember, % soil water emission for the biggest efflux. And that was kind of conclusion. But in our research, we concentrated to determine the exact number or exact moisture parameter, because later we use it for the modeling. Mm-hmm. For the seasonal modeling of CO2 emission. That's why for us it was very important to know this number.
Yes, it is. And so what do you think about when you have these climate prediction now indicating that you can expect more precipitation in some areas and less precipitation in other areas? I guess then you can have a very diverse picture. If you look at the whole huge boreal forest of Siberia, then you can probably have very different conditions in different places. What would you think about, how do you consider this to develop in the coming years if we have these greater regional variabilities of precipitation?
Yeah, you're right. From some scenarios, we'll get more like extreme events and also with precipitation. for the emission, it actually have a different impact. If we look at the forest part of the boreal region, the reaction to the increase of precipitation will be, I would say, positive. Like we'll get more emission, but it's also will be like another threshold after, for example, 60% of CO2 emission, we'll find a decrease of precipitation. Like we have some optimal parameters, and the deficit or over precipitated conditions, we have less emission. And if later will be like more extreme events, weather events with precipitation, I would say we'll get less CO2 emission for the forested areas of boreal region.
Okay, thank you very much. This was interesting perspectives, and it shows these different limiting factors. And it's not a simple. It is not a simple system. It's quite a complex system. So thank you very much. Is there any other comments or questions to Anastasia? Okay, let's go to the next presenter, Natalia Kryukova. Are you here? Maybe not. Then after that, we have Nitin Chaudhary. Are you here?
Yes, I am here.
Thank you very much. Can you show your poster?
Yes, I try to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, so good morning, everyone. My name is Nitin, and I am a postdoc in University of Oslo. This poster is about modeling and how we validated a model using observation dataset. It is regarding peatland and permafrost dynamics across Pan-Arctic. And this study has already been accepted in global change biology. And I am going to give a short introduction about this study. So peatlands are basically ecosystem where the net primary productivity is greater than the decomposition rate, and because of this imbalance, they have stored huge amount of carbon in the terrestrial ecosystem. And in my study, we have basically incorporated peatland and permafrost dynamic in dynamic vegetation model. Dynamic vegetation models simulate dynamic vegetation, and they assume a dominant plant functional type over an area. And in this study, we, as I've told you, we have incorporated peatland and permafrost dynamics in the model. So we have this kind of modular structure where we basically accumulate peat over the mineral soil, and we accumulate in the form of layers. There are multiple layers of peat, and we basically run this model for multiple patches. So some patches goes higher where we grow shrubs, and there are other patches which goes lower, and they are the water filled patches, and they are basically dominated by graminoids. And in between we have the patches which are dominated by mosses. And then there is this lateral flow between the patches. So this is how the model structure look like. We have advanced water balance scheme, we have advanced peat accumulation scheme in this model, and then we have applied this model across the first we have validated this model using observed data set from the Stottelen and from many other multiple peatland sites. Once we were satisfied that model is doing reasonable job, then we have basically applied this model across the Pan-Arctic. Here you can see that we have applied this model across the Pan-Arctic for 1,000 randomly selected points. And we have constrained our model using the observed Bessel H points And now our model knows when basically peat accumulation start across the Pan-Arctic. So we did some simulations in the present and in the past. Can somebody just tell me that my voice is coming, because sometimes it get lost? Hello?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yeah. So now I come to the result. So you can see that the model is able to reproduce the long-term carbon accumulation rate for the last 12,000 years. The blue line and the black line is the observed carbon accumulation rate, and the red and pink line is the modeled. And we can see that model is able to reproduce the right carbon accumulation rate in terms of, we can see it follows the right pattern, right trend, and it is between the observed range. And for the recent 1,000 years and for the recent past, from 1900 to 2000 and from 2000 to 2100. So I will basically focus on this part, decadal, which we know quite well. So here you can see this spatially distributed carbon accumulation rate across the Pan-Arctic. And we find that in the year, this is the first figure, this is for the year 2000. And we see that the carbon accumulation is around 30 to 60 gram carbon across the Pan-Arctic, which is quite reasonable, or not 30 or 20 to 60. And then if we go from here to here, these are the two warming scenario which we have considered. This is the low warming scenario, which is RCP 82.6, and this is the high warming scenario, which is RCP 8.5. So in both the scenarios, we see that there are significant portion of low latitude area which become a carbon source, while the areas which become high carbon sink, which are basically dominated by permafrost. Because as you can see here, this is for the year 2000, the permafrost distribution. And as we go from here to here, we see that low warming scenario, permafrost thaw basically as not much pronounced as it is in RCP 8.5. So in RCP 8.5 high warming scenario, we can see that permafrost thaw is a lot of area become permafrost free, and this extra moisture basically feed into this area, which basically resulted in high carbon accumulation. So regarding vegetation distribution, we see that majority of the peatlands are dominated by mosses. There are some peatlands which are dominated by graminoids and shrubs in the low latitude areas. So as these are this is RCP 2.6 and this is RCP 8.5. So in low warming scenario, we can see the shrubs basically remains in the low latitude area, but there are some patches which indicate that because of the warming, shrub basically migrate towards north. Similarly, in high warming scenario, there is a high tendency of shrub migration. So yeah, so overall, we found that model is able to reproduce the right carbon accumulation rate for the Pan-Arctic area, and under the both warming scenario, we found that peatland remain the carbon sinks, but their capacity basically reduces over the time, especially after 2050. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nitin. This was very interesting, and I have a question about the validation data. Do you have a good representation of validation data over this large area, or how is that?
Yeah, initially we have validated this model for the single site like Stoddalen, and then we have validated the model for the Scandinavian site. We have multiple data set for validation, and then we have again validated our model for the temperate peatland site, which is Merblu in Canada. So yeah, so we have tested a model in multiple sites, though it is not very perfect, but it is not very wrong also. So we have published so many papers, and we have one of these state-of-art model which is very close to the reality. As you can see that long-term carbon accumulation rate, it is basically able to reproduce that. And yes, if we get more observed data, we will tune in and calibrate our model.
Thank you. You also mentioned that you are publishing this work now in a paper.
Yeah, it is already been accepted in Global Change Biology, and it will be out in a week or two.
Good, very good. Okay, had anybody else want to have comments on this? Okay, Nitin, thank you very much. And then the question is now, if there are some speakers who did not show up earlier, if they are now, because I think we had to skip, I think 3 speakers, but are some of these speakers now available, or they have a chance to come and give presentation if they are coming in late? Okay. Is there any general questions now or any general things that you want to discuss now at the end of the session? Okay, I can't hear anybody who's really want to say something. So I think this was quite interesting. We had a good presentations of different topics, which are all very relevant for the climate in the Arctic. And I would say thank you very much to all the presenters. And I wish you just another good day in the Arctic Ocean Observing Summit. And I hope we can meet again at some other point. So thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.